Thank you, Senator Blackburn. Senator Welch.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Attorney General. I appreciate the work you've been doing on election infrastructure and security. We have our town meeting in Vermont next week. We're pretty proud of that. You raise your hand and decide publicly how you're going to vote, or you can do it privately. And I just wanted to ask you about the Department of Justice. You have taken important steps to protect election workers and the right to vote, and that includes by establishing the Election Threats Task Force. Let me ask you, what steps did the department take in 2022 election to defend our democracy and the election workforce? And are there any lessons learned that can help us going forward?
So we have, as you note, established an election threats task force aimed at investigating threats against state and local election workers. The FBI has been tracking those kind of threats that come in on their tip line and making those investigations. There have been a number of prosecutions and convictions regarding those threats. I'm not sure if that fully answers the question, but that's what we're doing.
That's good. And, you know, there's, from here, time to time, there's threats to local election officials that might happen in one state and then it might be another. What things can you do to be helpful in responding to specific threats against election workers?
Yeah, so obviously the first line of defense are the state and local law enforcement. What we bring to this is a particular both resources and legal tools that can be used to track the use of the internet to make those threats, emails to make those threats, text messages, telephone calls to make those threats. And that's a lot of what we do, is to help the state and locals identify the source of those threats, and then to go out and knock on doors and investigate, whether violence was actually contemplated.
And you have the resources that you believe you need in order to make certain that our elections are safe and sound?
I think we have the resources that we need to develop, to investigate these threats to the people who are really the foundation of our democracy, volunteers who are running our elections. That's the way we do things in the United States. Of course, state and local elected officials are also being threatened, but so also are the volunteers who are election judges, put the ballots in the boxes, et cetera.
Right. Thank you. The other area I wanted to talk to you about was, broadly speaking, antitrust, but specifically how it's impacting our healthcare system. My view is that one of the big challenges we have with affordable and accessible healthcare is the cost. And there's a number of factors that are driving up the cost, and I think that includes some anti-competitive activities. For example, hospital consolidation is a big issue. You go to the hospital, you get one of those bills, you just can't believe it. If you get out healthy, when you get the bill, you're going to be sick. And consolidation of physician practice groups. Big tech and private equity companies bought up all of these human resource companies when we had the need for these visiting nurses, and just exploded the rates, and it pulverized the budgets of our small hospitals in rural America. And just last month, the Wall Street Journal reported that CVS would purchase primary care provider Oak Street Health, broadening CVS's market domination as a parent entity of a pharmacy benefit manager. Now, I know you can't speak specifically about any particular case, but there's a consolidation trend and market power trend that I think is escalating these prices to the detriment of the taxpayer, to employers who are working hard to provide employer-sponsored health care, and obviously to individuals. In the past year, the DOJ has taken steps to update its antitrust guidance and has heard from patients and providers and advocates about how to bolster antitrust enforcement. I want to just give you an opportunity to tell us your view on this and the role you see the antitrust division of the Department of Justice making certain that we have competitive pricing, or trying to get some semblance of competitive pricing.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the question. We have tried, since I've been Attorney General, to reinvigorate the antitrust division, to more urgently evaluate mergers. and to bring cases against exclusionary behavior by dominant firms. Thanks to the Hart-Scott-Rodino merger filings fees legislation that was passed, we now have more money that we can use to build up again the resources of the department. As I mentioned earlier, I was stunned to learn when I came to the department that there were fewer lawyers and economists in the antitrust division than there were when I first entered the Justice Department in 1979. And you can imagine
That's
this.
amazing.
It's amazing, and the number, and you can, particularly when you think of how big the companies are now. So we're doing two things in the merger field, of course. On the very large mergers, which are subject to Hart-Scott-Rodino, we are doing a very careful scrub and making determinations of whether we should challenge it. But I think what you're talking about is also quite important, which are smaller markets, but are still what economists call relevant markets, where the price is affected regardless of whether it's a nationwide roll-up, if it's a roll-up of healthcare providers in one entity, and really the only place that people who need healthcare locally can provide it. So we have brought and will continue to examine those kinds of cases as well. The bottom line theory about antitrust is if there are multiple players in the market, they will compete with each other, and we will get the best pricing, marginal cost being the price where it meets the supply curve. But that's not the case where you have dominant firms, where there's only a few places to go. And in those situations, price will almost always be above the competitive price.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Attorney General, and thank you for your service on the bench before. And Mr. Chairman, I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator Welch. You're the first to do that. Senator Tillis?
I was actually going to thank Senator Welch for that. I think, Mr. Chair, we probably ought to have 4-minute rounds so we have a reasonable chance of them getting done in 7 minutes.